let's have a go at a second revision video then. And so I'm going to I've had a request, in fact, to have a go at something on. I hope you like my daughter's decorations. Something to have a go at is elasticity. So I'll probably divide this into two bits. So I'll start with elasticity and PED generally, and then switch over and look at the other elasticities in the second one. So elasticity, at its heart, is pretty simple. It just shows responsiveness to change, and all elastic means then, is that so elastic, it simply means that a change in one thing leads to a big change in another. What it doesn't tell you particularly, is anything about the direction of change or anything like that. So elastic, a change in one thing leads to a big change in another. Inelastic doesn't mean there's no change at all. What it means is that a change in one thing leads to a small change in the other. So obviously they've got to be linked, but that's your basic idea. So, and by big and small, what we have to get rid of my bunnies, I'm afraid. By big and small, we just mean more or less than proportional. So it's a really simple concept, that people get all hung up about kind of signs and so on and so forth. But the basic idea is, if it's elastic, big change. If it's inelastic, you get a small change. So, most common one then, the one you're going to come across most often, is price elasticity demand. And in words, that simply shows the responsiveness of demand to a change in price. But if we put it back into the context, into the idea that we were using a minute ago, it's just saying, does a change in price lead to a big change in demand or a small change in demand? So to find big or small, we're simply going to compare them. And that gives you the formula for price elasticity, which is the percentage change in the demand divided by the percentage change in price. And what we're going to say is a big change is if the change in demand is more than the change in price. So big is if that's, say, 10 and that's, say, 5, whereas small is going to be if you get a 5% change in price and you get a 3% change in demand, then that's going to be small. So that's elastic and that's inelastic. Elastic, therefore, means that we get a more than proportional change in demand following a change in price, whereas, obviously, inelastic means we get a less than proportional change in demand following a change in price. So if we have a look at an example to see, well, how does that work? Let's suppose then that let's suppose that a firm cuts its price from, say, let's read pink, £20 down to £18, and as a result of that, sales rise. So its demand rises from, say, 50 units a week, they rise to 60. So the first thing is, it's not the absolute change in price that matters, it's the percentage change. So a £2 change in price means nothing. £2 change in price for, a download is a very different kettle of fish from a £2 change in the price of a BMW. So what we do is we say, well, let's work out the percentage change. To do that, we have to take the change and divide it by the original and times by 100%. So for price, the change is 2, but we're going to say it's minus 2. It's gone down by 2 from 20 to 18. The original was 20 times 100. That gives us minus 10%. So that tells us that price has fallen by 10%. So we then got to compare that with the change in demand. We can see that demand has gone up by 10 from 50 to 60 from an original 50. Multiply that by 100 and you get plus 20%. What that tells us then is that price elasticity demand is minus 2. And that's where the difficulties start to come in. Because when you're told that an elasticity is at a particular figure, people often struggle with that and say, well, what the hell do I do with this? But what minus 2 means, really, is, those of you who know me well know about the secret unit of elasticity, the number of times. That minus 2 tells us 3 different things, Firstly, the minus sign is simply what's called a correlation. And that simply says that if there's an increase in A, it leads to a decrease in B, or a decrease in A leads to an increase in B. And in the concept of price elasticity demand, it's highly likely that elasticity will be negative. In other words, if you put price up, people buy fewer. It's pretty simple. Secondly, we can see that the two, what that means is the top is twice as big as the bottom. So what that means is that demand changes by 2 times as much as price. And because demand's changing by more than proportionally, it's that makes it elastic. So elastic demand means that we end up with a number like -2 or -3 or -4. Somewhere between -1 and -infinity. Those are the elastic ones because demand changes more than proportionally. The inelastic ones then are numbers like -0.6 or -0.8 or -0.2. Anywhere between 0 and -1. Those are the inelastic ones because it's changing less than proportionally. So when we say, well, what sorts of things are going to make demand elastic or inelastic, there are a few key things that you might want to think about. So if you think about the main factors, how necessary it is. Obviously, the more necessary it is, if price goes up, you're still going to want to buy it. Or you might want to think about whether there are a lot of substitutes for it. If there aren't, then even if price goes up, consumers might well continue to buy it. What sort of proportion of your income does it form? If it's a tiny percentage of your income, then even if price goes up, you may just kind of go, well, who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. So if the price of a bottle of water goes up from 50 to 60p or something, I mean that's 20% increase, but you just don't care because 50 or 60p is just irrelevant to you. And the other thing is things like is the time period that we're looking at. So are we thinking about the short run or the long run? In the short run, you've got less time to look for alternatives. So, I mean, there are probably others, but it's that type of thing, and it's more just having examples that you can bring up from your own mind to illustrate the points that you're trying to make. So, if we think about the kind of main uses of elasticity, then So what we can do is we can say, suppose I tell you that suppose we know that price elasticity demand is -2. We said that we know that's elastic, and we know that demand changes by 2 times as much as price. So if you were a firm, what you might be saying is, well, the right thing to do is probably, I don't want to increase price, but if I cut prices, I'm going to get proportionally more customers. My revenue is likely to go up. And the firm's revenue, its total revenue, is simply the price that it sells it for times the number of units. So if you sell 100 units at £5 each, your revenue would be £500. So let's suppose that we have this firm, and what it decides to do, is it decides to cut price, from 5 to 4, I'm going to pick a different example. So let's suppose just make the numbers slightly more challenging. So let's suppose that we start with a firm, that has a price of 20 quid, and it decides to cut price to 18. And let's suppose its original sales were 200 units. So its revenue to start with, so its quantity is 200, its revenue to start with is 4,000. And what we can see is that price has gone down by 10%. We know that price elasticity demand is -2, so therefore what's going to happen is that quantity will rise by 2 times as much. We simply take the percentage change in price, we multiply by price elasticity, and that gives us a plus 20% change in demand. And what we discover, is that demand is now 240. If you multiply that up, then we end up with some number that I wish I now hadn't done. We end up with 2,400 plus 1,600 plus 320. That's something like 4,320 or something. somewhere in that region anyway. Yeah. So we can see, yeah, that as a result of the cut in price, because demand rises more than proportionally, the firm's revenue goes up, and we can then show that on a demand line. Generally speaking, yeah, it is true to say, and I'm not really going to get into this, that demand is elastic up at the top, and it's inelastic down at the bottom, yeah, of a demand line. If you want me to say, I'll probably say more about that if I get on to do some theory of the firm diagrams. So therefore, let's call that 20, let's call that 18. What we can see is that a given change in price has led to a much more than proportional increase in demand, and that whereas revenue originally was that bit, yeah, revenue has now risen to that area there. Now that's not necessarily a great plan, yeah, because revenue and profit aren't the same thing. Yeah, so it's worth bearing in mind that a firm's profit, of course, yeah, is equal to total revenue minus total cost. And that although a decrease in price in this example here led to an increase in total revenue, we would also need to be aware, we need to think about what's happened to cost. And also we might think that in the long run, people get used to the lower price, they establish that as a new anchor. By contrast, obviously, if demand is price inelastic, yeah, you should increase the price. Yeah, because demand will fall less than proportionally. Yeah, but I'm already over my 10 minutes, yeah, so I'm not going to do that one. If you've got any questions, just ping me a message. I'll stick some questions alongside this in OneNote. Feel free to have a go.